I recently watched Godzilla x Kong and I've always had the question, who is that giant skeleton? Well, today we get an answer to that question. Let's go.
Biggest and most eyebrow-lifting moments of Godzilla Kong was the reveal of what could have possibly been the biggest, heaviest, longest, and
I don't know who that is, but I'm
monster of
glad
all
he's
time.
dead because we would have been in
We
trouble.
aren't talking about Ghidorah. We aren't talking about Shimo. And no, we aren't even talking about this animal with the enlarged skull.
Oh yeah, that one was
We are,
scary
in fact,
too.
talking about a bigger skull. Nope, larger than that.
Bro.
Bigger. Come on,
How
now,
big
blow
is
it
he?
up.
That's gotta be like...
Yeah, that's
Nah,
about right.
that's at
Yes,
least
there is
400
a whole
meters.
lot to
Nah.
talk about in this episode, but first, make sure you're subscribed to not miss any of
Hit
our
that
upcoming
subscribe button,
GXK
guys.
Explained episodes. The first thing that comes to mind when viewing this overly large skeleton is, how big is this thing? First revealed
I'm guessing
in one of the
400
GXK
meters.
trailers, most people were waiting to see the film to see if there was in fact some explanation that shed some light on this mysterious corpse.
Man,
This skeleton
I still
in
want an
this film would
explanation.
serve as a bridge connecting two landmasses that were divided by a river of lava that carved out a canyon over a very long time. Unfortunately, we didn't get much information about this thing in the film, but we do get a very small bit of info in the novel.
Novel?
Before we
Oh yeah,
reveal
there's a
this, let's
Godzilla
first
x Kong
take this
novelization,
skeleton and
right?
try to figure out a very rough estimate of the size of this
Bro,
skeleton.
this is like Eren
Let's
Yeager
start
Attack
with the
Titan, man.
skull. The book says that the head alone of this thing was much larger than Kong, and the film does show this really well. But we want more detail. To show how large this skeleton really is, we took the liberty to make a rough estimate using Kong's body as a reference and laying his silhouette flat against the surface area of this skull. The result being that Kong's entire body height can be laid around 5 times along the length of this skull, making this at least a whopping 1,685
600
feet
meters
in
tall?
length. And
That's just the head.
head.
That's what I said.
Right, folks, this astronomically large skeleton has a skull that is bigger than every single kaiju we have ever seen in the monsterverse.
Combined too,
For
which is
reference,
crazy.
Here's Godzilla next to the skull. Coming up is Titan Skar King. Still not impressed? How about Monster
Show me
Zero?
Ghidorah.
And we can add a speculative size of Shimo while we're at it.
No.
For shits and giggles, we can add Teenager Kong from 1973. Note how
He's
the
the same
fangs
size
of
as
this
the
kaiju
teeth.
greatly surpass the size of this ape, rivaling that of adult Kong also. But there's a lot more to cover about this animal. Miles more.
What?
That
Like what?
wasn't a joke.
Oh.
So yes, we settled that the skull alone was longer and bigger than any MonsterVerse kaiju, but what about the length? The best unit of measurement that we have here is Kong himself, who is standing on top of this skull. Given that
What
he
about
is
Suko?
337 feet in height, we'll multiply his silhouette many times along the visible length of this skeleton. Accounting for the distance, making his silhouette slightly smaller as the image gets farther away,
Oh.
we can count approximately
Bro.
52 units. And if we do the
52?
math, we get an earth-shattering number of 17,524 feet.
Yo.
That is 3.32 miles, or a little over 5.34 kilometers. We'll give you a second.
That is a
to
country.
soak
That is
in.
literally a country.
But some of us are visual learners, so we've got you covered. The tallest building in the world right
Ooh.
now at the time of the release of this
Isn't the
episode
tallest
is the
tower
Burj
like
Khalifa,
800 meters?
2,770
Yeah, oh, I knew
feet
it.
in height.
See, I'm too
That
smart.
means this skeleton is 6.5 times longer than the tallest building on Earth.
Bro.
Want a more vast example? Note that the deepest part of the ocean is around 7 miles
I
deep.
think he died because
Fully
of
stretched, this
starvation.
skeleton would take up more than 47% of this depth. So whatever animal
Okay,
this
I'm so
was
glad
could
he's dead, 'cause,
basically
bro,
swim to the bottom of this
47%?
vast pit in just a few seconds, only because it was that large. Oh, and this size only accounts for what is visible in this image. There's a small chance that the tip of this tail could have extended even further. To continue understanding the size of this creature, we'll move on to the very first image that was released of this skeleton, the rib cage. Note how both Kong and Suko looked extremely small when walking along the spine of this skeleton. But how tall are those things? Again, thanks to the presence of Kong in this footage, we can use him as the unit of measurement and multiply his silhouette approximately 4 times along the
4
length
times.
of the
What is that,
longest
like
rib here,
1,200?
approximately 1,348
Yeah.
feet in height. To explain how large this thing is, imagine standing near the Empire State Building in New York City. A rib this tall would stand at around this
Bro.
height, surpassing the
This is-
overall height of the
I don't know
building
who
itself,
this is. What is
only
this? Like,
barely
I wish they could get an
surpassed by the tip.
explanation.
But this brings up another fun thing to point out: the length of the head. Oh yeah, it seems as if this animal may have had an enlarged head after all. Since the overall length of this head was more than 5 times the height of Kong, standing this skull next to this Empire State Building would lay bare how massive this skeleton really is. All in all, the space inside this ribcage would possibly even be wide enough for Ghidorah to comfortably walk in between this massive ribcage if it was on the ground. But this wasn't the only time we've witnessed big rib cages like this. Moving ahead in the film, we find that in the Great Apes
I didn't even
there
remember
are
this.
also remains of
Is this
these
the same creature?
skeletons,
or maybe like
as
a
we
different
see
race?
Here, dwarfing every single life form found here, and yes, even Shimo. Even the Playmates figure pack features these enlarged ribs as additional accessories. So does the book tell us anything about these remains?
No, I don't think so, right?
Well, not so much.
Yeah, there we
but
go.
It does confirm
We even see
that
bones
these
on the
were
left
in fact
there.
living creatures. Previously, we discussed the small possibility that these bones were carved by the great apes and served as a bridge, only because of the fact that this thing seemed too large to fit in this cinematic universe. The book says otherwise, confirming that these actually used to exist at some point in time.
Bro,
and
this
for
has to be
some
before
reason
the
died
Titans
out.
even were born.
Interestingly, this
People
is
say
not
Shimo was the
time
first
we
Titan.
actually
I
see
think this
crazy
was.
enlarged skeletons just lying about. No, we aren't referring to this one. We're actually talking about a bigger one, somewhat similar to this
Wait, what?
skeleton here. In the animated Netflix series Skull Island, we see a strangely similar skeleton laying in the desolate terrain in a certain location in Skull Island. Similar to this image, these oversized ribs would stick out of the ground. Additionally, the skull of this animal somewhat resembles the one in GXK. There is one last and perhaps the most important
I didn't
question to
even know
answer.
that.
What did these things look like? We already got confirmation in the book that these at some point were extremely large animals. We aren't given a name, and we probably won't be seeing these creatures in their living form anytime soon. The best we can
People
do
are
is
things like King
reconstruct this
Warbat or
animal with
something
what
like
we
that.
already have. To start, let us begin with the posture. Given its large head and the fact that its shoulder blades are very close to the head and hips far down along the length of its body, we can assume the animal had a rather low posture.
I think
similar
like
to a
4
lizard.
legs, right?
More evidence to support this is the presence of a very long tail, almost
Imagine
the
it's like
same
Titanus
size
dog.
and possibly longer than its actual body. But something seems lacking. Where are the legs? Well, if you look closely, you'll see that the remaining bones are over here. Perhaps the great apes, after running into the corpse of this giant skeleton, positioned it to better bridge these two landforms, moving the legs aside, leaving the skull of this creature here, using the fangs to keep it anchored to the ground for it to prevent slipping, and the weight of the rest of the body bearing down on the ground, keeping the ribs and vertebrae suspended, serving as a bridge. So far, we've hinted at this thing probably being of reptilian appearance based on the skeletal anatomy
there we
of its
go. That's what
body.
I'm thinking of.
However, the skull of this animal also resembles that of a mammal. Given that some titans do seem to resemble hybrids of animals of completely different classes, it's not too far-fetched to think that this one in particular may have shared attributes of both mammal and reptile. Here on Goji Center, we took the liberty to try to recreate one of many possible ways this animal could have looked like based on what was previously discussed. The first thing you're going to notice is the
I'm telling
fact
you,
that
that's
this
dog,
creature
bro.
may have had some luminescent elements. Why? The caloric intake of these colossal titans would have been so much to
is
the
he
point
meaning
that it
like
would
we
be
can see him
unsustainable.
in glow in the dark?
In no time, the entire Hollow Earth ecosystem would have been drained of vegetation or other prey to keep
exactly,
these things
bro.
alive. So the other
could
more
eat the
plausible
entire
way to
world
keep
in
these
like a
things
day, I
alive
think.
would be by absorbing radiation. Similar to many titans like Godzilla, Ghidorah, Scylla, etc. Radiation plays a vital role in the sustenance of these creatures. Therefore, it's only reasonable for these creatures to feed on radiation, since there's plenty of that down here and not enough food on the planet to keep these things alive for a long enough time. This may
Maybe
also
that's
be
why
an
they died. I
explanation
think they
of why
eat
these
food, to be honest, because he
creatures
looks like he
die.
died of
Crocodiles,
starvation.
who, by the way, have a somewhat similar skeletal anatomy to this one, age very slowly and most of the time die of disease, predation, habitat loss, but almost never from aging. That's because they go through a phenomenon known as negligible senescence, which
What
is
does
when
that
an
even
organism
mean?
does not exhibit any evidence of biological aging, which is why you see animals like tortoises and big crocodiles live for a very, very long time. These guys usually die of stuff other than aging. So, back to our big skeleton, these guys probably died out due to their bodies being so large that the radiation intake was not enough to keep these guys functioning.
Yeah, so they died of starvation.
At some point
basically.
during their lives, their energy intake began to be unsustainable, causing them to, in a way, starve of radiation and then proceed to die. Since, to be honest, these things are way too big to be hunted down by anything.
Imagine like
That
another
we know
race.
of.
Whoa,
The
my.
existence, appearance, and fate of these creatures will remain a mystery until more information and canonical material is released. These were once powerful creatures, but the fact remains that the Titans, the great apes, and other megafauna ended up being the ones who prevailed in the Hollow Earth.
Ooh, Goji sent it out here telling us everything we need to know, but I probably think that another species of this, because there's another one in Skull Island that we saw. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Did he die of starvation or did another race kill him? But that's gonna be the end of this video. I hope you guys like it. If you did, hit that subscribe button. Let me know what video I should react next, guys.